brother. They Diane Wysek. And anyways, growing up on a farm has its pluses and its minuses. The pluses are there's a lot of fun things that you can do, and when you're a farm kid, there's a lot of things that you don't get to do when you live in town. And so, but there's a lot of other things too that there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work. And my mother was kind of really strict, and work came first, and God wasn't really in the mix. But when we were kids, we did a lot of fun things. We used to play ball. We used to go hay mow, make hay tunnels, and swim in the old dirty frog pond, and didn't think anything about it. I mean, it was a great life. And when we had company come, the kids, my kids always want to hang around the kitchen table and listen to what we had to say. We didn't do that. You got kids, come on, let's go. Call us when you get ready to go home. And I can remember one time, you talk about, there's a lot of dangers on the farm too. And I can remember one time, and it comes to mind different times. We had a silo on the farm, and there was no roof on the silo. And I was about 8 years old, and my brother was inside and cleaning out the last of the corn. And I said to him, I said, Mike, I'm gonna climb to the top of the silo. He says, you better not. He says, Ma's gonna be mad. I said, she's never gonna know. So I shimmied right up the silo. There was no roof on it. The silo was empty. I was about 8 years old. Threw one leg over the side and thought, how beautiful it is out here. So I told my brother, I says, go in the house. He said, Mom, look out the window. And so they came out on the steps, and they're like, boy, I came down that silo just like that. And I was surprised. I think that was the only time that I did something that I wasn't supposed to do, and I didn't get a licking. And they didn't just don't ever do that again, ever, and I never did. Once was enough, Now I can't get 2 steps on a step ladder. That's what age does for you. But we did a lot of work, and it was good. It was hard work, but it was, we were all worked together. When I was in the 4th grade, I was in the barn at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I used to say, for Marvin, my younger brother, I says to my mother, how come he doesn't have to go to the barn? Next year it's his turn, and he'll be going too. And I thought, but it was a good time. But the sad part about it was there was no God in our life. We were Catholics, but we were only Catholics on holidays. And when we made our first communion, we made our confirmation, and it was all ritual. It wasn't God said this, or God said to do this, or God said this is the way it should be. It was, you make your first communion, this is what you do. You go to confession, this is what you do. And it was, confirmation was the same way, but there was never any God in it. It was all about church rules. And that's all we learned was church rules. Don't let the host touch your tongue or you're going to hell. Don't do this or you're going to hell. And it was really hard. But when you're a kid, they ingrain that into you so hard because you're a clean slate. You're a clean slate, and this is what they tell you. And it stays in for you for a long time. And my husband was the same way. And so, later on, of course, I got married when I was 18. My husband was 20, and everything was great. We lived in the city for 1 year, and then we started building our house out here on Route 12. It was a slow process, trust me. And but first year, 1969, gonna have a baby now. Boy, we're gonna be a family, and it was great. I just couldn't have been happier. I just couldn't have been happier. But I used to go up to the farm just every chance I got. And one day, it was a farm accident. And Dave was 2 years old. He was in a drowning accident. And he drowned, and it was probably the darkest day of my life. Because after that, it's like there's this hole, and I didn't know God then. And I think about now, people who don't have God, when times are really hard, what do they do? What do they lean on? Where do they go? Because you're all by yourself. And I just couldn't wait to have a baby to fill that emptiness that I had. Because there was not a minute of the day where his name wasn't on my lips. Dave, 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 I want my baby back, I want my baby back, I want my baby back. Well, one day I went to the doctor and I was pregnant. And it was one of the happiest days of my life. And so okay, finally, I'm gonna have this baby, I'm gonna fill this hole, I'm gonna fill this void in my life. And so I went into labor and I thought, oh, pretty soon I'm gonna have my baby back. But what you don't know is you're not getting your baby back. You're gonna have another baby and it'll be yours, it'll be God's, and he'll give you what you need. Well, when I had that baby, they said it's a girl. And I was so disappointed. I wanted a boy so bad, but nothing takes the place of the one that you lost, ever. But when they put that baby in my arms, the void was filled. And she was such a blessing because God knows what you need. He doesn't give you what you want. He gives you what you need. And he gave me a little girl, Jill. And she was such a blessing. And so, time went by and I got pregnant again. I thought, well, okay, here we go. God gave me a boy this time. He wasn't Dave. He was his own little person. And things were better. Time does heal, but you never forget. And the hole is always there. And it's heartbreaking. And it's been over 50 years. And I think of what would he be today? What would God have given him? The sad part is that because we were still holiday Catholics, we didn't seem to grow. God was there, but we didn't grow. And that was the hard part, because if you don't teach your children about God, your children don't know. They just don't know. My parents didn't teach me. I didn't teach my kids. Probably the biggest factor in my life of God was my sister-in-law, Diane. She has brought me far. If you don't know, she's not a pushy person. She'll tell you what you need to know. She won't tell you what you think I want to hear. She's just super. Amen. She's always been there for me. We've been friends forever. We've never had a crossword. We've never had a disagreement. Nothing. She is sent straight from God. I never had a sister, but if God would let me pick one, I'd pick her. And second, I would pick Connie Earl. I mean, they are just sweet, lovable people. So after Eric was born and Jill was in school, and it was 1977, because Jill was born in 72 and Eric was born in 1975. And my husband got a job with the power company, and things were going along good. We're still working on our house and stuff, and they were going to have this trip through the company. It was a baseball trip, bus trip, and we were going to go to New York City. And so I made arrangements, got the kids where they were supposed to be, and we were going to be gone like 2 days. And so, okay, I'm all ready, I'm packed up, and I'm ready to go. So we've never been anyplace, we've never done anything. And then, okay, I'm sitting there on the step waiting for him to get home from work. Wow, he's going to get here pretty soon, we're going to miss that bus. We're going to miss that bus, and we've never been anyplace. And, you know, I'm in my 20s, but still not mature, but didn't have any wisdom yet. And so then the phone rang, and I think, what? Where is he? Where is he? They said, called and said, your husband's been in an accident. And I thought, well, how bad could this be? If he's got a broken arm, maybe we can get it fixed, and we just still make that bus trip. What was I thinking? And then my friend Phyllis kind of came along, and they said, you need to go to the hospital right now. They said it's not good. And he was on a motorcycle coming home from work, and there was a person going down Route 12, down where the Albans lived, down through there. The guy had been at the Cottage Inn, had a few drinks, did construction, supposedly fell asleep. But there was a car coming from Watertown, and Ron was behind the car from Watertown. The guy went over into her lane, hit her. He hit the lady ahead of him. He went like this over the top of the car. He broke both arms, both legs, had a concussion, and the handlebars stuck in his chest and missed his heart by that much. When we got to the hospital, it was, and I'm still like, all I can say is, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. You know, I should have been praying, but all I could say was, oh God, because I didn't know what to do. When they finally let me in to see him, I did not even recognize him. His face was swelled up so big. And they said, well, he's broke both arms and both legs. And we don't know if he has internal injuries, so we're going to do an exploratory. So they went in and everything was all right. And then they casted him up. He was in the hospital 65 days. And I mean, it was like this. I mean, he didn't move. I mean, he was in intensive care for 12 days, and he didn't know who I was. And I kept saying, I'm your wife. I'm your wife. You're married to me. I'm your wife. Some people might have said, you're on your own. but slowly, they got him out on the floor, and he kind of regained his memory, and things got better. It was a very long recovery. He had to do the exercises, and the doctors told him that he would never walk again without a limp. Well, that's not true. You know, he was very determined, and he did his exercises. If we were someplace, I got to go home, I got to do my exercises. You know, and he finally got well. He's got a few scars and bongs today, but you know, and these are my zippers, and here's my busted this and pins, and but he did really well, you know, and it was. After that, I was with Diane one day with her friend, and we went to a Bible study, and it was in the 80s that I got saved at Beulah house, and it was a day. I didn't really know about being saved, like what is being saved. You know, I know that there's God, but I don't really know him. And so it was interesting every time we went to Bible study, but that's when I got saved. And it was, makes your life be different when you know what you're supposed to be doing instead of what you're doing. You know, so it was you know, the kids had all graduated from high school and were in college, and from there life went on, and Ron recovered, and then one day I went to the doctor and had my mammogram, and he says, you need to come in and see me. And I thought, what? So there's suspicious something going on. And I says, have I got cancer? And he says, I want you to get a second opinion. And so I did. I went and got a second opinion, and the doctor told me, he says, well, I don't think it's anything serious. I says, well, if I were your wife, what would you do? He says, I probably wouldn't do anything. I says, well, we need to do a biopsy because I have to know what this is. Not knowing is worse than knowing and finding out. So I went and had the biopsy, and he says, Mrs. Eddy, he says, don't you worry. He says, when you wake up, he says, I'm going to tell you I told you so. Well, when I woke up, he says, Mrs. Eddy, I'm really sorry. He says, you have cancer. He says, I'm sorry. I said, I told you so. At that point, I just said, just let me sleep. I am so tired. Just let me sleep. So he says, there's things that we can do. And I says, well, I want to be alive for my grandkids. I said, I don't want to be, I was a lot fitter than I am now. I was a lot younger than I am now. And so, you kind of think about these things, and you think, oh, let me see. And I said, I just want to be alive. I don't have any grandkids yet, but I want to be here when my grandkids get here. So we opted for surgery, and everything went well, and I took 8 treatments of chemotherapy, and they were nasty, but I didn't lose my hair. It wasn't nasty enough where my hair, right, Gail? I kept my hair. We even shopped. I took Gail, we went shopping for a wig in Syracuse, and then I didn't need it, and they didn't want to take it back. But, and again, I remember many days that I stood in the shower and I just cried. And I thought, why me, God? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Why me? This is stuff that happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. And then I think, why not me? Why not? I'm somebody else. And it just, that was a recovery period too. And again, my sister-in-law was there with me too. And you need reassurance. You need to be around people that can reassure you about God. Because you can't do it on your own. It's not doable to do it on your own. And those are the parts that you really need the support. And we didn't have a church. We didn't really go to church, so I don't have any church I don't have a family. I didn't have a family then like I have now. There wasn't a prayer chain. There wasn't anything. It was you get it on your own. And so, it's very emotional. It's very emotional. Lose part of your body. But I was healed, and it's been 27 years. I've been cancer free. So I like to think that God steered me in the right direction, even though I wasn't leaning on him. He's right there, and he kind of give you a little push, a little nudge, and this, and you don't even realize it. You don't realize and you just don't realize how awful it is when things happen to you and you don't have God by your side. You don't have him to lean on. You don't know. He's here. He's up there somewhere. He's up there somewhere. But you have to know that he's beside you all the time. And I finally learned that, and things still happen to you in your life, but when you've got somebody to lean on, it's called faith and hope, and you have to have that every day. I have a better relationship with God today than I'm all day long, I'm talking to God. And when I need a parking place, I pull into Walmart. I says, God, I need a parking place. And I don't want to walk very far because my feet hurt. And lo and behold, I don't care. And Ron's with me because I do the driving now. And lo and behold, that parking place will appear in the handicap every time. And I think, Lord, thank you so much. So it's even the little things. You can ask him for the little things, and he will provide each and every time. It's amazing. So after that was 95, and my kids are married, or Jill was getting ready to get married, and we were on a trip. We were going to Maryland, and Ron wanted to stop in York, Pennsylvania, because he was a collector of these little tractor thingies. And so we're about 6 hours into our travel, and we're going down the road, and we'd already been to this toy place, and we're just kind of going along, and we're on a road like the Black River Road over here, and all of a sudden, here comes this truck, and it's coming right down our side of the road, and I'm thinking, I see this. I see this. This guy's going to get over. He's going to get over, and we're doing 40 miles an hour, and it's like, I got goose pimples right now even. This guy didn't get over, and we hit the truck head on, and the truck, it was a 4-wheel drive pickup truck, and it came right up on the top of the car, and the airbags went off, and again, God was with us again. And the car turned around in the road, and it was pointing sideways, and the car caught on fire, and we got out of the car, and God puts the right people in the right places at the right time. The people that were coming toward us, we were in this lane going this way, and this guy is in our lane, but the people that were coming toward us behind this older man was an EMT. They stopped the traffic, jumped out, got us out of the car, and the old guy didn't get hurt because he was in a 4-wheel drive truck. He was way above us. And Ron got some cuts to his hand, smashed the windshield, totaled the car. There wasn't anything left of the car. Eric was in the back seat, and he just asleep, and he just kind of rolled off and got a knee bang, and I got a cracked sternum, and my foot went under the seat of the car, so I had a really bad sprain. But we got out of the car, and we were alive. I don't know how we were alive. But again, God was with us. God was with us. And we ended up going to the hospital. We had to get a rent-a-car. And I finished up our vacation on crutches. And we came home, and it was like, boy, was I glad to be home. I was just so glad to be home. After that, my daughter was married, and the next year, and they were married several years before they had any kids. And then in 2002, they moved to Colorado for Joe's job. He worked for Lockheed Martin, and they went out there, and Josh was born out there. And of course, that's not across the street, so we didn't travel right out there. She had the baby and stuff, and then we went out to visit, and Josh was a sweet little thing, and I noticed that things just weren't quite what they should, something's not right here, you know. And of course, Jill, never being around kids, didn't really pick up on it. And he was, you know, he did a lot of flapping. I don't know if you know what flapping is. If you take a baby and go like this, the baby will go. Well, that's not a normal response, but Josh flapped all the time. And so I said, Jill, maybe there's, you need to take him someplace. You know, he was about a year old now, and she see that something was wrong. He wasn't talking like he should. He was 2 years old, and they diagnosed him with autism. And that was really hard to take, because I remember Joe would say, he says, well, you know, he doesn't talk, and he does all the characteristics the autistic kids have. They don't look at you, and they're just kind of in their own little world. But he said, you know, he says, if Josh, the only thing Josh can do is bag groceries at a grocery store, he says, I'll be so proud of him. You know, and I thought, oh, thank you, God, for giving Jill a husband that understands, you know. And so when Josh was 2, he was diagnosed with autism. And today he's 18, he's nonverbal. You know, it took a long time to get him out of diapers, and he has been sick lately. He's been really, really sick. But they've kind of gotten back to normal again. And he doesn't talk. He's got his own little language that he uses. But he's very computer smart though, you know. And I mean, and there's days you just want to jump off a cliff, because they do things over and 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 over. And it's just, I don't know if I can take it. And I says, well, God doesn't give kids like him to people who can't take care of them. And she's been a fabulous mother. But when Josh was 2, she found out she was pregnant again. And she said, if I had known that Josh was going to be classic autistic, we would have never had any more kids. Well, Sydney was born, and Sydney has autism. She's 15. She has Asperger's. She's very smart. She's very musical. She's very artistic, but she's very outspoken. And if you want to talk politics, she's the girl. Do not debate her on anything. Right, Wendy? She comes up in the summertime for a week, and we go to Wendy's house, and Wendy has a piano, and Sydney loves, she can play piano like Beethoven. Yeah, she's good. And if you tell her that you're interested in music, well, you're going to be your friend forever, you know. And her problem is that she can't socialize. I guess I can't figure out how a person can be so smart and not know social skills. But it's like that part of her brain is shut off, and she doesn't know how to come in and read a room, that if nobody's talking to you, you don't say anything. But Sydney's the kind of person, if you come in and there's a bunch of people and nobody's saying anything, Sydney will say, well, this is an awkward silence. And it's like, Sydney. I mean, but she's a sweetheart. She thinks every person in this world is a good person. And unfortunately, she's got tangled up with some people that weren't good people. She's in school now, and they took her out of public school, put her into a Christian school, and she knows the Bible like you wouldn't believe. I mean, she comes to our house, and we have to analyze. Ron and I do morning devotions every morning, and we read out of the Bible. And so when Sydney came, I says, okay, Sydney, we're going to read out of the Bible this morning. And I says, you read, then I'll read, and Grandpa's going to read. Okay. So she read, and then I read, and we were reading about Mary and Martha. And she says, okay. She says, now we're going to analyze. We're going to talk about this. And I says, well, what do you want to talk about? I says, pretty obvious. It's Mary and Martha. She says, no. She says, we learned in school, she says, that you have to figure out these things. She says, for instance, she says, why was Mary at Jesus' feet? And why was Martha in the kitchen? Well, I really don't know. So she says, did you think, she says, maybe Martha was the way she was because we don't know how she was raised, how her mother raised her. Maybe her mother instilled in her good, like work ethics, and that it was more important to cook than it was to pray. What? Wow. I guess I never thought of it on the floor like that. And she says, so, okay, Grandpa, now it's your turn to analyze what you read. And he goes, well, he come out, he says, I think it was led by the Holy Spirit and something that he rambled on. She says, not too bad, Grandpa. She says, that's pretty good. Oh, Cindy. So I said to her, the next day I says, so tomorrow when we read, do we have to analyze again? She says, of course. I says, well, maybe we'll skip tomorrow. But, the kids are a blessing. Our son Eric, he has 2 kids, and they're well. They don't have any issues. Jill was, and she says sometimes, she says, Mom, why would God give me 2 autistic children? Why would he give me 2? Isn't one sufficient? And I says, well, obviously there's a reason, and we may not know till we get to heaven why he gave you 2 autistic kids. But her kids are everything to her, and they are Jill and Joe and Sydney. Josh doesn't speak, but I know that they're saved. And so that it does my heart good to know that. So there's some trying times, and Jill doesn't have a lot of friends because actually she has no friends because she doesn't have time to have friends because of the kids. And Sydney has no friends at school because kids don't want to be friends with her. She's the smartest kid in her class. She got a report card yesterday, and she's a 4.0 student. And, there was cheating going on in the class, and she told the teacher, and the teacher did nothing about it. And Sydney was so frustrated. She said, I have to work for mine, and the kids take their phone, and they get the answers off the phone. And so she gets pretty frustrated with that. But time moves on, and Jill has to help her every day. It's kind of like Groundhog Day. We have to go over this again. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. It'll get you in trouble. But one day at a time. Jill says, I can only take one day at a time. So, and that's where she's at. And, moving on down to the final few here, 2 years ago, it was in November, Ron was having trouble breathing and went to the doctor. And the doctor says, you need a stent put in your heart. When we finally got there, Diane was there again. She's my true blue person. And we went to Syracuse to get the stent put in. I said, boy, when we get done, he's going to be a new man. He's going to be out walking. And he's going to be doing, he's going to be great because he was really slow. And it's just like, really slow. He couldn't get to the mailbox and back without I can hardly breathe. Well, anyways, Diane and I, it was during COVID, we sat in the waiting room there, and we waited, and finally the phone rang, and the nurse called, and she says, well, I says, he's done already? She says, no, we didn't do anything. She says, we got in there, and he was so blocked, we couldn't do anything. She says, he needs a bypass surgery. I said, what? A bypass surgery. She says, we'll have him back in next week, and we'll do open heart surgery. And I was like, what? And I just cried. I just cried because this isn't what I thought was going to be. This is not what I thought it was going to be. And again, it was the election day because Diana was working, so I had Ron's brother took us down. We were having a snowstorm. I thought, oh man, Satan's right in there, and man, he just keeps dishing it out. He just keeps dishing it out, and it's like, but we made it down there. And of course you couldn't go in, and I had asked the nurse. I says, well, I'll wait for him. No, you won't wait for him. Nobody's going in anywhere. He's going to come in, and you won't see him for a week. You call. You don't go in. There's no waiting room. There's no nothing. You just wait. And I thought, oh Lord, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? So we went back home, and I waited, and the doctor called that afternoon, 3:00, and he says, well, we're done. He says he did okay. He says because he was going to go in for a 3-way, and he says we did a 6-way. I said a 6-way. I said I didn't know you could even do that. And he says, oh no. He says we've done 8 before, but he says 6 is pretty much right up there. And he says he's going to be in the hospital probably a week. And I said, only a week? Because I was thinking, oh, don't send him home. Don't send him home. Well, I was petrified. I was absolutely petrified that this is going to take place. I was just petrified. And I called him the next morning, and election came, and he was still full of drugs. And he says, well, I guess we have a different president. I says, what? Who cares? But he was so alert, and so I said, oh my God, this is a miracle. I says, and he says, I'm ready to come home. I says, I don't think that's a good idea. So I kept talking to the nurse, and the next day I talked to him, and he's going down. By the third day I talked to him, and he was like, I want to come home. I want to come home. And he says, nope, you're not coming home. And so I talked to the nurse, and she says, well, she says, depends on how good he does. He can come home or not. And I said, you keep him just as long as you can. I said, because I don't know what to do. I'm not a nursey kind of person. I'm not medical at all. And she says, we'll take as long as it takes, you know. And so in a week, it was just 1 week, went back to get him. And Diane took us again, and with her car, and she says, now discharge takes like 5 hours. I said, no way. They said it was going to be She was right. It took 5 hours to get him out of there. Nurse came, told me all the drugs he's got to be on. This, do this. He's got a cut on the inside of his leg. It was almost from the groin just to the middle of his calf of his leg, and one on the other side where they took the veins out. But I did not know that he had infection, and they didn't tell me that he had infection. And so they put a wound vac on him. And so the girl was telling me, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And if this happens, do this. And if this happens, do that. And I'm thinking, man, if I get out of here without having a heart attack, it'll be a wonder. But we got him out, got him in the car. Diane helped me get him home. Jay came along, helped get him in the house. And everybody left. And it's like, oh, man, I'm on my own now. Wow. So the next morning we get up, and he's, I'm trying to help him get dressed. And I'm like this. I'm shaking like a leaf. And of course, I'm trying to help him put his pants on. And when, I grabbed a little too hard, and I pulled that wound vac off. And it started to beep and make all these noises. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what do I do now? And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so I called public health in Lowell. They said, you need to call your doctor. Don't call us. So I called them, and they said, yeah, you need to get here within an hour or so. She says, because it can cause more infection. And so, I said, oh my God, I don't know what to do. So I called Diane. And I says, where are you? She says, I'm on my way back from Watertown. I says, I got to be in Syracuse in an hour. She says, I'm on my way. And she came down. We got his clothes on, because the people at Syracuse says, well, can you be here in half an hour? I says, we live 70 miles away. We're not across the street. And she says, well, be here as fast as you can. So we got him loaded in, and we took him to Syracuse, and we went in with him in the wheelchair and stuff, and they pulled the wound vac off, and everything came with it. It was awful, but actually it was the best thing that could have happened, because the wound vac came off, and then they bandaged him, and it healed a lot faster. There was one part, and I don't want to bore you people, but back before Ron had his surgery, we had a little incident one time. Well, I say one time, it was a time, because this was very important to Diane and to me both. My father passed away in 2006, and my mother lived 10 years after that. And she was a very controlling woman, very harsh. She wanted what she wanted when she wanted it. And she still lived there with, Dad was gone, and she was very independent. And Diane was the same. We had Lifeline, and every time Diane was on Lifeline call, first responder, I was second responder. Diane was down there all the time. She's got a heart of gold. And she fell one time, and Diane says, well, I'll stay with her tonight. And so Diane stayed with her, I think, a couple nights, and then I said, well, I'll stay with her a couple nights. Well, she didn't really get better. She just didn't get better. And so, long story short, we were there 7 months, day and night, 24/7. And you talk about emotional terror. That's what it was. And Diane finally got to the point where it was just so demanding, and we didn't get sleep. And she might be up 10 times a night, trying to go to the bathroom or this or that. And she wanted what she wanted, and it was emotionally draining. And it was to the point where I would just sit we had a rollaway bed in the living room, and I could just see into the bedroom where I could see if she was trying to get out of bed, because she couldn't walk. But she would try to get into the wheelchair, or she would try to get on the commode, and she wouldn't tell anybody because she was very independent. And if she fell, it was going to be bad news. And she had told me one time, she says, if I fall, it's going to be your fault. And I thought, my fault? I didn't want you to get up to start with. But it got really, really bad, and she did get abusive, and she had Alzheimer's and with the dementia creeping in, and she kind of saw things that weren't there when she was on certain medicines, and it was very, very stressful. And And then one day she wanted to get out of bed, and I said, like, I'm not going to get you out of bed anymore, because I said, I can't lift you. I said, I can't lift you anymore. And Diane was strong in areas that I was not strong in. And so I told Diane, we had stayed at the house because there'd been a snowstorm. The two of us stayed for emotional and physical support. And so Diane went home that morning she said, I got to go home, I got to pay bills and take a shower. I said, okay, I'll stay here. Well, I wanted to get out of bed. I said, I can't let you get out of bed again. I can't let you get out of bed. I can't lift you anymore. I can't lift you anymore. I'd got a hernia from lifting, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And she says, well, you're going to get me out of that bed. And I said, no, I'm not. And I'm going to move the wheelchair, and I'm going to take your cane. And I said, you're not going to get out of bed anymore. And she got really, really abusive. Really abusive. And it was funny because at night when I would go to bed, I would sit on the side of the bed and cry because I said, I can't take this much. God, I can't take this anymore. I can't take it anymore. And so the next day, all this took place, and I called Diane, and we had to get Adult Protective Services to come. And the lady that came she was a sweetheart. We ended up, that night, getting I would say it was by hook or by crook. We got her to Louisville with a transport, and she ended up with a UTI. Thank God, it's the only thing that kept her at the hospital. And she ended up in the swing bed unit, and from there she went to a nursing home. And I remember Diane walking out that night. As Diane says, it was a parting of the Red Sea moment. You don't even know. You don't even know. We walked out that night, and it was snowing. It was midnight. And Diane said this. She says, who would have thought this morning that she said your mother would be in hospital and go into a nursing home, and that this would be over for us. I mean, I love my mother dearly, and all the things that she said. It was a funny thing that even though she was saying really horrible, horrible things to me, I could forgive her, because holding a grudge doesn't do you any good. You can't hate. You just can't hate. I don't know where her mind was, but you just can't hate. You can't hold a grudge. I forgive her. She's gone now, and and she kept saying, well, the whole time she was in the nursing home, I don't know why God keeps me alive. She says, Josh has autism. And of course, and I'm leaving out one thing, when Eric got cancer, that was the thing that really brought me to the Lord, because I've lost one son, and I don't want to lose two. And Jay asked us to come to church, and he says, we're going to have prayers for Eric today through you, Aunt Pat and Uncle Ryan, and we came, and this church has been such a godsend to us. And everybody gathered around us, and I never had that before. Everybody gathered around us and laid hands on. And I just felt so much love in this church that I never felt in any other church. And I said to Ronnie the next week, he says, the pastor was really good. I said, I know. I says, there were a lot of prayers that people gave to us too. And I says, I think we should go back next Sunday. And so we went back the second Sunday and the third. He said, I really like that pastor. I really like him. I like what he's got to say. I said, I do too. And I says, besides that, we can't suck all the prayers out of this church and then not go back.
That's awesome.
And we've been here ever since, and this church is such a blessing to us. But the thing, people used to say, how's it going? And I used to say dull and boring. I don't say dull and boring anymore. Because if it's dull and boring, everything's going good. Because when it's not dull and boring, there's usually panic. And I find that in this world that sometimes bad choices can mean very costly teaching moments. And I just want you to know that how I appreciate all you folks sitting here listening to my woes. And I don't want you to think that my whole life was doom and gloom, because it wasn't. But you got to find your happy moments. And if you don't have bad times, you don't learn to enjoy the good times. So when good times come, I really thank God for the good times, and that's my life, and I never know what God's got in store for us tomorrow. Tomorrow's another day. You can only take one day at a time. But I feel so bad for people who don't know the Lord, that don't have Him to walk beside them and to lean on. I just can't even imagine how awful their life must be. Because it's, in these last 7 years, I've come to know the Lord like I never knew Him before. And I know that he's there in the dark, he's in the daylight, and I cherish the things, like I go out behind the house in the summertime, and it's a gorgeous day, and the sun is shining, and I'm thinking, thank you, Lord, I'm going to remember this day next winter. It's so special. And when you look, I think about the sun, when the sun comes up, when you've got a beautiful day. This is the same sun that God made when he created the world. It's the same sun. And I don't think people realize it. They think, today's a sunny day, big deal, you know. But it's not. It's not. It's the same sun. And he's always there. And I thank you, ladies, for listening to my story.